On July 3, 2026, an 18-year-old boy stood in his kitchen and made his family dinner. Salmon. Nothing special. Just a Friday night before a holiday weekend. His mother would remember every second of it later. How he hugged her, how he kissed her cheek, how he said, "I love you," on his way out the door. She had no idea it was the last ordinary conversation she would ever have with her son. Less than 24 hours later, Nolan Xavier Wells was gone. Not missing for an hour, not missing for a night, gone from a group of friends on a remote island, gone from every photo taken after a certain point in the afternoon, gone from a boat that brought everyone else home. 2 days after that, his body was pulled from the water. And in the weeks since, his father has said something that has quietly reshaped how millions of people understand this case. His son did not choose to stay behind. Not the way investigators first suggested. Not the way one early statement implied. According to Elmore Wonsley, that explanation just doesn't add up, and he is done staying silent about it. This is the story of Nolan Wells. What we know, what we don't, and why a grieving family is now demanding answers the state of Mississippi has not yet been able to give them. Before we go further, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. True Crime Vault covers real, ongoing investigations with careful attention to the facts as they're confirmed, not speculation dressed up as certainty. We'll be following this case closely as new developments come in, so subscribing means you won't miss an update. And if this story moves you the way it's moved so many people already, drop a like. It genuinely helps this case get in front of more people who might have information. Now, let's start with who Nolan Wells actually was, because before he became a headline, he was a son, a teammate, and by every account, a genuinely good kid. Nolan grew up in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, a coastal town just east of Biloxi, the kind of place where the Gulf is never more than a few minutes away and boat trips are simply part of growing up. He graduated from Ocean Springs High School in 2025, where he played wide receiver for the football team. Friends and coaches remembered him as a kid who worked hard and showed up. The kind of player who didn't need to be the loudest person in the room to be trusted by everyone in it. After high school, Nolan enrolled at Southwest Mississippi Community College, where he continued playing football as a wide receiver. He was, by his family's account, exactly where he wanted to be. Training for the upcoming season was supposed to start right after the holiday weekend. He had plans. He had a team counting on him. He had a life that was just getting started. His mother, Christine Wonsley, has spoken about her son with the kind of specificity that only a parent carries. Not vague grief, but detail. She remembers what he made for dinner. She remembers the exact words he said before he left. "It was hug, kiss, and he left," she said. Small, ordinary, unremarkable, until it becomes the last time. On the morning of July 4th, Nolan set out to do what countless Americans were doing that same day, celebrate the holiday on the water. He joined a group of friends for a boat trip to Horn Island, a federally protected barrier island roughly 10 miles off the Mississippi coast. It's a place with no permanent structures, no running water, no cell service to speak of, just white sand, shifting shoreline, and open gulf on every side. According to his family, Nolan had made this trip before. It wasn't some reckless first-time outing. It was familiar ground. Photos from that morning show a group of friends doing what groups of friends do on a holiday, smiling, posing, enjoying the water. In one image that would later circulate widely, Nolan towers over the others, his arm slung casually around a friend's shoulders. Nothing in that photograph suggests anything other than a normal day. But sometime after those photos were taken, something changed. And what exactly happened in the hours that followed, the hours between the boat leaving the mainland and the boat returning without Nolan, remains, even now, the central unanswered question of this entire case. By the time the group came back to shore that afternoon, Nolan wasn't with them. For a few hours, that absence might have seemed explainable. Maybe he caught a ride with someone else. Maybe there was a plan nobody else knew about. But as the evening wore on and no one heard from him, the silence started to feel different. Around 11 o'clock that night, one of Nolan's friends called the Wonsley family. Nolan Wells was missing. What followed was one of the more urgent search efforts Jackson County had seen in recent memory, and, almost simultaneously, one of the more complicated public conversations about race, assumption, and how quickly official explanations can fracture public trust. Christine Wansley didn't wait for updates to come to her. She went looking for them herself. Within hours of getting that call, she turned to social media, posting details about her missing son and asking anyone with information to come forward. She and her husband traveled to the area to search in person. At one point, another mother, Tashema Hands, whose own son had been on the trip, used Snapchat's location tracking to locate Nolan's phone at a house where, in her words, a lot of people were gathered. It took about 15 minutes, she said, for someone inside to actually hand it over. When Christine went through that phone, something struck her as wrong. Not obviously wrong, quietly wrong. There were no photos, no videos, nothing saved from the day her son disappeared. "I know my child well," she would later say. "If he has a phone out all the time at home, he's definitely going to have a phone out whenever he's out and he's doing things with his friends." A phone that clean, on a day like that, didn't sit right with her. It still doesn't. That same day, the Jackson County Sheriff's Department announced it was coordinating with the United States Coast Guard and Mississippi's Department of Marine Resources to search Horn Island and the surrounding waters. Volunteer groups joined in too, including the United Cajun Navy, a search and rescue organization based in Louisiana that has helped in disaster response for years. Their vice president, Brian Trasher, later described the beach that day as packed. Boats everywhere, people everywhere, some of them drinking. "If someone had gone into the water," he said, "the rip currents that day could have made survival difficult." Sheriff John Ledbetter offered an early explanation for why Nolan hadn't come back with the group. Based on what investigators had been told, he said, it sounded like Nolan had chosen to stay on the island, expecting to catch a ride back with someone else later. That explanation did not sit well with the people who actually knew him. Javon Williams, one of the friends who had been on the island that day, pushed back directly. "I've never known Nolan to stay back while his friends leave," he told CNN. "He's always been a guy where if he rode with you, he's going to come back with you. That's always how he's been every single time." Nolan's own family said the same thing, almost word for word. They described raising him with a simple rule. If you go somewhere with a group, you stay with the group. It wasn't a suggestion, it was how he operated. And that's precisely why the sheriff's early account, that he simply chose to remain behind, never made sense to the people closest to him. This is the tension that sits at the center of this entire investigation. Not a wild conspiracy, not an accusation without basis, just a simple, painful contradiction. The official explanation for why Nolan was left on that island doesn't match who the people who loved him say he actually was. For 2 days, Nolan's family held on to hope. On July 6th, Christine Wansley wrote publicly about how many questions they had, how their hearts were breaking, how they kept waiting for their son to walk through the door with what she described as his beautiful smile and one of his jokes. "We pray our son is alive and safe," she wrote. Later that same day, that hope ended. A body matching Nolan's description was recovered from the water near the island's shoreline. It was later confirmed to be him. He had been found by a National Park Service agent, face down in the water off the coastline, on what would have been his second full day missing. According to Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind, there were no immediately obvious signs of physical injury. But because of the condition in which Nolan's body was found, the coroner's office made the decision to send the case to the state medical examiner's office rather than handle it locally. Specifically, Lind said, to definitively determine whether there was any trauma or foul play involved. That detail matters. It means that even from the very beginning, officials themselves felt this case required a higher level of forensic scrutiny than a routine drowning would. As of the most recent reporting available, officials are still waiting on toxicology results before any official cause of death can be determined. That process, according to law enforcement analysts familiar with cases like this, is not unusual. It often takes weeks, sometimes longer, to get a complete and accurate picture. But weeks can feel unbearable to a family desperate for answers, and that gap between "we don't know yet" and "we need to know now" is exactly where this story has lived ever since. It's also where the trouble started. On July 6th, the Jackson County Sheriff's Department released a statement saying that no foul play was suspected in Nolan's death. 4 words that were likely meant to be reassuring instead became one of the most contested phrases in the entire case, because almost immediately, that statement collided with something else: the photographs from the boat trip. In image after image from that day, Nolan appears to be the only young black man among a group of white friends. For a lot of people watching this story unfold, that detail, combined with Mississippi's long and painful history around race, turned quiet grief into public alarm. People who had never heard of Horn Island before that week began sharing Nolan's photo, asking the same question over and over. How does a healthy 18-year-old disappear from a group of friends and end up dead in the water? And why is the immediate official answer nothing to see here? To be clear about something important, no evidence has been presented, not by police, not by the family's own attorney, that conclusively proves this was a hate crime or that any specific person caused Nolan's death. What multiple public figures and legal representatives have said repeatedly and carefully is that they don't yet have enough information to rule it out either. And in the absence of a clear, transparent explanation, a community with deep historical reasons to distrust quick, tidy answers from Mississippi law enforcement was never going to simply accept accidental drowning, case closed. That distrust is not new, and it is not irrational. It's the product of history, and it's exactly why the Wansley family's next move mattered so much. On July 7th, just one day after Nolan's body was recovered, the family retained civil rights attorney Ben Crump. If that name sounds familiar, it's because Crump has represented the families of some of the most high-profile cases involving black victims and questions of institutional accountability in the past decade. His involvement almost instantly elevated this from a local Mississippi news story to a national conversation. Crump was direct about the family's position from the beginning. He said he had not been able to speak with the young men who were on the boat trip with Nolan because they had already obtained legal representation of their own, a detail that, fair or not, only deepened public suspicion about what those final hours actually looked like. Then came July 8th. The Sheriff's Department issued another statement, this one acknowledging the wave of speculation spreading online, but insisting that investigators were working to establish the facts through eyewitness accounts, physical evidence, and other reliable information. It was, in essence, a request for patience. But patience is a difficult thing to ask of a mother who hasn't slept since her son went missing. On July 10th, the Wansley family held a news conference. Christine Wansley spoke publicly about how the sheriff's own statements had left her uneasy. "I do absolutely respect law enforcement," she said. But when investigators floated the idea of accidental drowning, something about the speed of that conclusion didn't sit right. "Why are we so quick to rush to this?" she asked. Her message wasn't an accusation. It was a request. "What we're wanting is transparency," she said. "At the end of the day, we want answers." Attorney Ben Crump went further, saying the family had requested an independent autopsy because, in his words, it is not adding up. Nolan's body was flown from Mississippi to Washington, D.C., specifically so that a medical examiner with no ties whatsoever to Mississippi law enforcement could conduct a completely independent review. It's a step families rarely take unless they have genuinely lost confidence in the official process. And it tells you exactly how much doubt had built up in just a matter of days. Crump said on July 11th that results from that independent examination were expected soon. As of the most recent updates, those results, along with the official toxicology findings, have still not been publicly released. Officials with the Jackson County Sheriff's Office have told reporters they believe Nolan likely drowned, but they have been careful to stress that no official cause of death has been finalized and that the investigation remains active. This is a point worth sitting with for a second, because it's easy to lose in a story this emotional. As of right now, there is no confirmed cause of death. Not officially, not from the state, not from the independent examiner. Anyone telling you they know exactly what happened to Nolan Wells in his final hours is, at best, speculating. And speculation, in a case like this, can do real damage to real people. That hasn't stopped speculation from spreading anyway. In the days after Nolan's death, a video began circulating widely on social media. Audio recorded near the island on July 4th in which someone can be heard yelling, seemingly in the middle of a heated argument. Given the timing and location, many people online immediately connected it to Nolan, treating it as evidence of a confrontation involving him. One of Nolan's own friends came forward specifically to correct that narrative. Tracyston Shepard told Rolling Stone directly, "In that video you hear somebody yelling, that is me. Not Nolan. Him." It's a small but important moment in this story because it shows exactly how quickly an information vacuum can fill with confident-sounding claims that turn out to be wrong. Investigators have publicly asked anyone who has original, unedited photos or video from July 4th, particularly anything showing an altercation or anything involving Nolan directly, to come forward. That request alone confirms that authorities are taking reports of a possible confrontation seriously enough to actively investigate them. But taking a claim seriously enough to investigate it is very different from that claim being confirmed. Right now, it sits in the first category, not the second. Sheriff Ledbetter has tried to manage expectations publicly, acknowledging the pressure the family and the public are under while asking for the time a thorough investigation actually requires. "Folks want answers 10 minutes ago," he told a local news affiliate. "But unfortunately, that takes time to get the accurate information. It's going to take a lot of hard work." For the Wansley family, a lot of hard work is exactly what they've committed to. They've said publicly that they intend to keep pushing until they have real answers. Not because they're chasing a particular version of events, but because the version they've been given so far doesn't match the son they raised. Christine Wansley put it about as plainly as a parent possibly could. "At the end of the day, I would hope any parent would fight for their kids to find out if anything happened." Support for the family has come from some notable places. Civil rights activist and former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick reportedly helped fund the cost of the independent autopsy. Filmmaker Tyler Perry has stepped in to help cover funeral expenses. Reverend Al Sharpton has appeared alongside the family at public events, calling for what he described as a full, transparent, and urgent investigation into what happened on that island. Filmmaker Spike Lee has also expressed support for the family, according to those close to them. At one point during a public appearance, Christine Wansley made a request of her own, not to investigators, but to Nolan's friends and community members who had begun organizing small protests in his memory. She asked, pointedly and sincerely, for those demonstrations to remain peaceful. "Nolan was not someone who liked fights," she said. "He really didn't even like arguments. So don't go out there trying to be tough. Just think about what Nolan would want, and I'm telling you, he would not want that type of behavior." It's a striking moment, because it shows something about who Nolan actually was that gets easy to lose in a story dominated by legal statements and forensic timelines. This wasn't a symbol before he was a person. He was a person first, a teammate, a son, someone who, according to the people who knew him best, avoided conflict rather than sought it out. His mother wasn't just managing a media moment when she said that. She was protecting his memory. As it stands right now, more than a week removed from the day Nolan disappeared, the central questions of this case remain open. Why didn't he return with the group he'd traveled with? Where was his phone during those missing hours, and why did it come back with nothing saved on it from that day? Was there an altercation? And if so, did it involve him in any way? And perhaps most importantly, what does the toxicology report, once it's finally released, actually reveal about how he died? None of those questions currently have confirmed answers. What we do have is a family that has refused to accept the first explanation they were given, an independent legal and medical process running in parallel to the official one, and a community watching closely to see whether the answers that eventually come will actually hold up. There's also something worth acknowledging honestly here. In the vacuum created by a slow, careful investigation, misinformation has moved faster than facts. Claims about what supposedly happened on that island have spread widely online, some of them directly contradicted by the very people involved, like Nolan's friend correcting the record about that viral video. Law enforcement analysts who've reviewed the public details of this case have noted that nothing about the pace of the investigation is actually unusual. These things take time, but they've also acknowledged that no foul play suspected, said too early and too plainly, can do more harm than good when trust is already fragile. What's not in dispute by anyone is this. An 18-year-old young man who had his whole life ahead of him went out on the water to celebrate a holiday with people he considered friends, and he never came home. His parents haven't slept properly since the night they got that phone call. His siblings are grieving a brother who should have had decades left. A football team is missing a wide receiver who was supposed to be back on the field this season. Horn Island is still out there, exactly as it's always been, untouched, quiet, shaped by tides that don't care what happened on its shore. But for Nolan's family, it will never again just be a place people go for the 4th of July. It's the last place their son was seen alive, and the place where every unanswered question about his death still begins. Elmore Wansley has said he doesn't want his son remembered as a headline, or as a symbol in a larger argument, or as a case number waiting on a lab report. He wants him remembered as Nolan, a young man who made his mom salmon before he left the house for the last time, who hugged her, kissed her, and told her he loved her, the same way he probably had 100 times before, with absolutely no idea it would be the last. We will continue following this case as new information becomes available, including the release of the toxicology results and any updates from the independent examination the family requested. If you have any verified information related to what happened on Horn Island on July 4th, authorities have specifically asked that you come forward directly to the Jackson County Sheriff's Department, not social media. If this case affected you the way it's affected so many others watching from home, take a moment to share it, not to spread speculation, but to help keep attention on a family that is still, right now, simply asking for the truth. Subscribe to True Crime Vault so you don't miss the next update on this story, and let us know in the comments what you think investigators should be prioritizing right now. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. He deserved to come home. His family deserves real answers, and they deserve them soon.